move on to how we can iterate across a set. So the big thing about sets is that since they're not ordered, they don't have the notion of just being able to get by an index. And so if we want to iterate, then we're going to be really dependent on that iterator object to go ahead and walk across a set. So a quick overview for this slideshow is we'll have an introduction, and then we'll do motivate some examples. So we're going to iterate a set using an iterator. Then I'm going to show you what the concurrent modification exception is by trying to add to this set when we have an iterator on there and we're actively iterating it. Then I'm going to show you that we can remove a set element using the iterator. I'm going to show you that we can iterate a set using an enhanced for loop, and then we can iterate a set using a forEach method. So we can use, that's one of the powerful things about the enhanced for loop that you didn't get a chance to see when it's only with lists. When it's with ordered items, the enhanced for loop appears to be just a shorthanded way to iterate across objects. But another powerful thing about it is since it doesn't use a loop control variable that's indexing into it, it allows you to actually iterate on things that are unordered as well, such as sets. So again, this is why it's considered to be, and that's the true enhancement on it. Okay, so a quick introduction is in this lecture, we will learn how to iterate a set in Java. A set interface does not provide any get method like the list interface does to retrieve elements. Therefore, the only way to take out elements from the set can be by using iterator method. But this method does not return elements from the set in any particular order. So let's see how many ways to iterate set in Java. There are mainly 3 ways. We're going to use the iterator object. We'll use the enhanced for loop, and we'll use the forEach method, which was just introduced in Java 8. So really recently ago. So iterate set using iterator. Using the iterator method, we can traverse only in the forward direction. Well, our concept of a forward direction, it's not ordered. So we're just moving from one object to the next, from the list to the last element. We cannot traverse over elements in a backward direction using the iterator method. Well, because that's a list iterator behavior anyway. So let's take an example program where we'll iterate elements of a set using the iterator method, follow all the steps in the coding. Okay, so here we're going to look at iterate set 1. Go to my IDE, and let's close out this old code, and let's go to iterate set 1. So here I'm going to go ahead and import my hash sets. I'm going to import my set interface. I'm going to import the iterator object, all from java.util, because that's where the collection framework is located at. I'm going to create a class so that I can have a main method so that we can actually build an application to play around with these concepts. I'm going to create a hash set, an empty hash set, and I'm going to save it into this variable called s. And so this is going to be a set that contains strings. So we're going to use that generic typing. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to query my set for its size, and I'm going to print that out. Then I'm going to add some elements to my set. So I'll add orange and red and blue and yellow and green. And then I'm going to print out the new state of my set. Then I'm going to go ahead and use the iterator method on set to get an iterator object. And so I'm going to have to, when I declare my variable to hold my iterator object, the data type will be iterator, and it must use generic typing that is the same as what the generic typing for your collection is. So it's going to be a string. And then the iterator methods are all the same that you'd expect from the universal iterator. So the iterator that is defined from the collection interface. So while we have another, while the cursor sees that there's another a next item in the set, we will go ahead and then tell the iterator to give us that next item, and then it's going to advance its cursor. but we'll grab that item that gets returned, a string, and then we'll print it out. So you can see we use our iterator on a set exactly the same way we had used our iterator on a list. And if I run this, we can see there it is. We have, let me stretch this out some. So the size before adding elements, 0, elements is set, red, blue, yellow, orange, green. And then the iteration using the iterator method gives me red, blue, yellow, orange, and green. And again, I give you this output so that if you're using these slides as a reference, you can easily be able to look at the source code and match it to the expected output. Okay, so let's talk about the concurrent modification exception. So what is a concurrent modification exception? Well, during iteration, we cannot add an element to a set at a iterator's position. So if we try to add an element during iteration, the JVM will throw an exception named concurrent modification exception. This is something the set does, because remember, there's a tight boundness, there's a tight coupling between the iterator and the collection it iterates across. So if you try to make the collection go out of sync from the iterator, Java will prevent that. Here, the key point is the iteration means repeating the same operation multiple times. The universal iterator doesn't support adding. Oh. And so in our second example, what we're going to do is we're going to try to make a program that tries to add an element during the iteration to see what happens, to see how the JVM throws that exception. So this is our source code. It's really simple. Let's jump back over to the IDE and I'll open it up. So this iterate set 2. Here, I'm going to import my hash sets so I can build a set. I'm going to import an iterator so I can have an iterator. I'm going to import my set interface because that's the level that we're storing our set at the moment. We're going to create a class so that we can have a main method. We're going to have a main method so that we can run the application. We're going to create a new empty set and we're going to add some labels in there. So banana, orange, apple, and mango. Then I'm going to get an iterator from the set. So I'm going to invoke the iterator method and I'm going to store the returned iterator into this variable. So it's an iterator first that will return to me string objects. And then I'm going to walk across the set. So while my iterator has a next thing, a next string, I will grab the string, but then in the middle of this iteration, right, in the middle of this while loop, I'll also try to tell the set to add grapes. And if I try to run this code, what's going to happen is it printed, so it got returned apple, it printed apple, and then when it tried to add grapes, we get that exception, concurrent modification exception. So if you see this exception, this is the reason why. Okay, yep, and that is our output. Okay, let's look at another common thing we want to do with the iterator is we can actually use the iterator to remove a set element. So at wherever the iterator position is at. So we could do the same thing with the list iterator as well, right? I mean, this is a remove is something that is part of the universal iterator, but we'll make use of it. We'll show that we can make a program that will remove a set element at an iterator position during iteration. So again, just some small code that looks very similar to the other one, but instead of trying to add, we will remove. So we're going to import the same things here. We're going to declare a class. We're going to make a main method. We're going to create an empty hash set. We're going to add 4 things into it: banana, orange, apple, and mango. We're going to grab the iterator from our collection, from our set. We're going to create a while loop that will use the iterator as a loop control variable. So long as we have a next item, we'll continue to do this while block. We'll grab the next item from the iterator. We'll print it out. And then we're going to check if that item, if that string is equal to mango, we're going to remove it. And then we'll print the actual values of the set thereafter. And this will not throw an exception, and the set will actually be mutated thereafter. So here we can see apple, mango, orange, and banana. but after running through our iteration, it is now just apple, orange, and banana. We remove mango. Okay, let's show how we can also iterate a set using the enhance for loop. So in this section, we'll iterate elements of the set using the enhance for loop. We'll make a quick program. Let's jump back to the IDE here. Oh, that's not what I want. I want iterate here. Okay, so here I'm going to import my concrete class hash set, and I'm going to import my interface set. I'm going to create a class, iterate set for, the fourth example that we're doing here. I'm going to create a main method so that we can run this. I'm going to create a set for integers, and it'll be initially empty, and then we'll populate it with some values. So I'll create a traditional for loop that will start at 10, and it'll go to 30. And here I will increment it. So all the integers there in between, and then I'll check if whatever the current loop value of I is, if it mod 2, if it's even, then I'll add it. So that'll give me all the even numbers between 10 to 30. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to print out the initial state of my my set. Then I'm going to go ahead and walk through using the enhance for loop. So here, since an enhanced for loop only needs a local variable and a collection, something that that implements iterable, then I can then go ahead and use that just to walk across it. So even though this isn't a ordered collection, that doesn't matter with the enhanced for loop. And then I can go ahead and print out the value. So here, let me go ahead and run this. And we can see, yep, we have, stretch this out, our even numbers. No idea, 16, oh yeah, that, yep, you can see I have all my numbers, but they're not ordered in any particular way, right? Using numbers is a great way to illustrate that ordering is not happening in sets. 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 10, 26, 12, 28, 14, 30. And then iteration using the enhanced for loop, where we'll go ahead and then just go ahead and walk through and access each individual one of those values. And the key point here is that I want to also, the third way that we can potentially iterate across a set is using the forEach method. So this is the third way. It was introduced in Java 8, and it's a very simple way to iterate over elements once you learn it. So there's two ways that we can iterate over elements using the forEach method. We can either use what's called a Lambda expression, which was introduced in Java 8, and it's a very powerful mechanism. So we'll learn about Lambda expressions as part of our topical overview and examination, our deep dive in the collection framework, because Lambda expressions are very useful when working with collections of data. Also, we could pass in a method reference as well, which is probably the first time we've seen a method reference. So what I'll do, though, is on the slide, I'll give an additional resource so that you can read a little bit more about Lambda expressions and method references. And so I'll leave that on this slide. Okay, let's take a look at the application here. You might have a little bit of notation that's not, you haven't seen before, but I think it's decipherable. I think it's something that you should be able to kind of parse and understand. So here we're going to go ahead and import our concrete class hash set. We're going to go ahead and import our set interface. We're going to create our iterate set 5 class, our fifth example of trying to iterate across a set. We're going to make a main method so we can actually run this. We're going to create a set of characters. So again, we're going to use that generics typing, and we'll just call it S. Here, we're going to add the characters A, B, C, D, and E. And then we're just going to print out the initial state of our set. And then we're going to do two different types of iterations here. We're going to use the forEach. So we're going to use the forEach method. So notice that S, on the set itself, has a method that allows us to walk across it called forEach. And we can either pass it a reference to a method. And so what it'll do is it'll apply this method. If it's a reference to a method, then it'll apply this method to every element inside of that set. So for each element, it's going to do system.out, and then the : println allows us to pass that method as a reference. So if we do the dot, if we did the dot operator, and then if we do it like this, that's invoking the method, right? We don't want to invoke it. We want to pass this method code to this forEach method. And so we could do that using double colons. That's happening there. So inside of system.out, there is a method called println, and we want to pass, we don't want to invoke that method. We want to pass a reference of that method to this forEach, and then the internal mechanisms of forEach will then be able to invoke that method, and it will pass to this method each of the individual values that are contained in the set. So I know that this is a weird thing. This is probably the first time you've seen how we can actually pass a method reference in Java. And then the other thing is the Lambda expression. So here we're going to iterate using the Lambda expression, which is, so here we're passing a method reference. If we don't pass a method reference, then we have to define an anonymous method. And the easiest way to pass an anonymous method is what's referred to as a Lambda expression. So on a Lambda expression, you can kind of think of this as a method in and of itself, where this is the parameter. So the parameter would be I. And then this would be what gets computed inside of the method body. So this is our input, and you could think of this as an arrow. So the input, the parameters go into this method body. And so this method body is just going to be system.out.print I. And so this is going to get passed effectively as a method, as a free-floating method that forEach will then use and invoke on every element inside of S. So let's actually run this. I know this probably looks a little bit stranger, so please ask whatever questions you might have. But what you're going to see as a result from this is we're going to print out the original state of our set here. So A, B, C, D, and E. Then we're going to display iterate using forEach loop with method reference. And here, this is where we pass the method reference. Notice we do A, B, C, D, E, right? Each individually getting passed in or printed out. And then we're going to iterate using the forEach loop with the Lambda expression. And notice that gives us the same output, A, B, C, D, E. Excellent. And so that really is the three ways that we have to be able to iterate over a set collection. So if you are working with the set collection, that'll give you a good understanding of how you can like process the data that's being contained within there. Now let me see here. I do want to see how long do I have enough? Oh, this is a relatively large. This is a relatively large slide deck. So I guess I only have 5 minutes, so I won't move on to my next slide deck today. So we'll just have covered the first two slide decks of our of sets inside of our collection framework. But what I want to do next lecture is actually cover the hash set, the concrete classes of hash set, and of linked hash set, and of tree set. And so I'll try to very rapidly run through all three of these on our next lecture, so that we can move on to the next item in our collections, which is going to be maps. Excellent. So does anyone have any questions about the material that we covered today? Okay, if not, I will stop. Let me share my screen. Let me stop the recording then for the lecture.